You're listening to Law and Coder, a Hike 2 powered podcast that explores the intersection of technology and law to help you navigate the fast-changing world of legal tech.
Welcome back to the Law and Coder podcast. It's been a little while. We've been kind of busy running around the country, really, both of us, Morgan and I. First, our Pittsburgh Innovation Summit that Hike 2 hosted, which was just awesome, really great networking and ideas and innovation from all over kind of everywhere and across industries. I'm your co-host, Christina Natale, the Director of Legal Strategy and Advisory at Hike 2, and my co-host, Morgan Llewellyn. Hi, Morgan.
Hi, everyone.
We're going to talk today about a really exciting topic, and I say that earnestly because I know that as soon as we say the words out loud, it probably doesn't sound super sexy and exciting, but we're going to talk today about data transformation strategy. You look excited, Morgan.
I'm
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about data transformation strategy as it pertains to law firms. And we're really lucky to have, a co-presenter today, a co-host, in Emily Rushing, just a dear friend and really, an expert in the field and, a wealth of knowledge. So, really excited to have her. And I'll introduce her here in a second or let her introduce herself. But, data transformation strategy, why we're talking about this today is if we think about the role of data traditionally in law firms, it really was security focused. We have to keep our client data secure. And that was, kind of the first through the 10th mandate and, almost the only mandate at some level. And over time, that mandate hasn't changed. It's still 1 through 10, the data has to be secure. But now what we've been finding is really there's some additional mandates. How do we generate value for the business operations using our data? How do we generate new and additional value for our clients, through new and differentiated work product that is informed by data? And so we're starting to see a need to use data, not just for security and keep it secure, but to use that data to help transform the business and really to help transform the work product and bring clients additional value. And so that's why we have Emily Rushing with us today. Emily joins us from Holland Knight, and I'll let you introduce yourself, Emily. I'm thrilled to, see you again. She's a dear friend and I really respect her and her opinion and, just her expertise. So thank you, Emily, for joining us. Introduce yourself for the folks on the call.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. The feeling is mutual. I'm a friend of the podcast, friend of Hike 2, and you guys aren't sick of seeing me yet, so that's great news. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Emily Rushing. I'm the Director of Data Strategy for Holland Knight. I have more than 20 years law firm experience, the last 17 of which have been in data analytics, intelligence, technology, innovation-focused roles. So I joined Holland Knight a year and a half almost ago to a newly created Knowledge and Innovation Department, our first ever Chief Knowledge and Innovation Officer. And part of the vision for our Knowledge and Innovation function, my data strategy group included, really reflected the firm's massive growth. So like a lot of firms, we've gotten very big, very complex, very geographically diverse, very diverse in terms of our practices, and everything Morgan said as far as protecting our client data and being compliant with everything we need to be compliant with. There's a recognition now that we have to differentiate ourselves in the market, right? We have to do things the Holland Knight way that attract our clients, that retain our clients. They know and trust and appreciate our work product over another firm's, but the same also with our people. So in order to attract and retain the right talent, the best talent, culture is really important. The spirit of innovation is really important. Understanding our firm's strategy, having leadership, setting the tone, and then providing a technology-enabled work environment where people are happy and satisfied with their jobs and doing their best work to their highest and best value. So that's kind of a new tone for law firms to take over the course of my career. I've been pleased to see us going in the direction of having those thoughts, but it's an exciting time to be in legal technology. It's an exciting time to be talking about law firm data. It's the first time my job has ever been cool.
I think
You know,
we've got
Emily,
everything we need. We can just play
yeah.
that outro music. We're good to go.
No, I think you said something in there, Emily, that resonated with me because I have heard this, but not so eloquently in other places around the role of people's happiness and how data and new tools can impact happiness at law firms. How do you see the impact of data actually improving the well-being? Let's take it very broad, right? The well-being or happiness of people. I mean, yeah, can you talk about that?
I go around the firm. Last year we hosted an all lawyers meeting. We conducted 20 hours of innovation lab. I stood on my feet. My feet hurt just remembering it. But it was so engaging. We had hundreds, my estimate's closer to 1,000 lawyers. It was certainly hundreds coming up asking us, how will AI take bad data out of my life, improve data quality? How will it automate the creation of data? Why am I doing the same manual, I say hands on keyboard? Why am I tippity tap, tap, tapping all this stuff over and over again? And I do it badly, if at all. I fill out forms badly. I choose from drop-down lists badly. The question was, we believe that, I guess the attitude has been, we believe that, and this is actually kind of our AI statement, we believe that AI has the potential to transform the business and practice of law for the betterment of our professionals, and create client value and create well-being, wellness value, to take that noise out of people's lives, I have to stop what I'm doing and find the form and open it and make it, PDF it and then type stuff into it. Why am I doing this over and over again? Can you create an environment that's data enabled that automates some of these things or remediates them or cleans them up or groups them the way I need them? And the answer is increasingly yes, we're going to go in these directions for you.
So let me ask you a seemingly hard question. I'm not like, it's not a gotcha question or anything like that. I'm just curious what you think. So well-being, I've heard this from, other people, and that's not to, disparage it. It's actually, hey, no, this is important and we should be talking about it. The challenge is, how do we measure this? And can you actually put this in front of, an advisory board, an executive board, and say, there's value here in just well-being. Yes, okay, here's the ROI and some of these other things. How do you even communicate well-being? Like, how do you communicate that? That seems hard to me. That's why I mean it's a hard question. Like, or is it it's an also thing, but you got to justify the numbers first and foremost, and this is just a benefit. How do you think about that?
Very qualitative, isn't it? I know your numbers brain doesn't like that. I think the people process part of culture, of strategy, right? We've now added technology and data, but the people being at the heart of a human-centered everything, transformation strategy, human-centered, business strategy, human-centered, innovation. These are, I say, all full contact sports. And so there's the more ephemeral, ineffable, right? I heard a good story from an associate who says she's so happy with this new solution. Okay, right. So we capture those, we call them testimonials. We also, it's early days for this kind of measurement, but I have had experience tracking and managing retention. Do people that may have been at risk, meaning they're in a category in a year of their career or a certain cohort of type of employee that statistically departs the firm at this rate, but following certain key innovation initiatives, that rate leveled off or even went up, the retention rate. So there are things like that you can start to put hard and fast numbers around. It's hard to say strictly causal, but you can show an indication. People are more satisfied. They stay in their jobs longer. They give good feedback to us, whether it's an informal testimonial or a formal survey. And that's actually in our innovation department strategies. We want people to be happy at their jobs. So setting that tone and then saying, we're going to look for these clues and these characteristics, and that's how we'll know we're successful, has been embraced by our leadership and should be.
I love that testimonial, right? You're right. I am a numbers person by design. And while I can appreciate the behavioral aspect, and I know how important the behavioral aspect is, right? It's how do you communicate the value? And I do think, testimonials, not only are they great because, it's a real person and a real quote, I think it also addresses one of the challenges that we see, which is communication. Once something is out there, how are we continuing to communicate and engage and get feedback and provide feedback? I think that's really interesting. Christina, what are your thoughts? And
I would just say I love this comment. I could like literally sit here and eat popcorn or something and just like listen to you two all day for sure. But it really spoke to me as well. I love the way you asked the question, and then when Emily framed it back. For me, workflow redesign, but really understanding user impacts, user drivers, motivations is really important to me, as you know. And I really do. I love the idea that it kind of goes in both directions. It's that by engaging users and understanding, when we think about data, we almost never start in law firms with practicing lawyers and how it affects their day, their practice of law. And by starting with helping them understand how data can improve their practice of law, will increase their buy-in, will increase, and you're going to get, again, those operational, financial, whatever benefits that are measurable, those success metrics. And you're also going to have happier lawyers because they understand before they've even done it. They've bought into, this is going to make my life easier. This is going to help me provide better and more exciting and innovative service to my clients. So I just think it's a win-win all around. I love the way that you all described it.
so let me ask you a question, Emily. This is gonna be the let's pick Emily's brain session, and we're probably going to need more of these. So let me ask you a question. So, all right, I'm at a law firm and I want to start a data transformation strategy. Where do I start? Or is the reality, have most law firms already started? And, here's some of the early lessons or that type of thing. So, where would you start? Or, if most firms are already kind of on this journey already, what do you think the early kind of feedback, the early results are looking like? What to do more of, what to do less of, that type of thing.
It's a really mixed bag. That's a great question. It's a mixed bag. Firms vary greatly, both in their composition, right? But mostly the differences, I think, when I think about transformation and innovation practices in firms, it sounds kind of hokey and simple, but really starting with a clear strategy. What is the vision? What is the goal? Coupled with a deep understanding of the culture. And I like the phrase radical honesty. We all humans struggle with really, really being honest with ourselves about who we are and what we're not. And you can't transform unless you start with a very clear understanding of where you are today. And a very clear understanding, we say leadership buy-in, et cetera, but a really clear understanding that the culture, meaning from leadership on down, everyone in the firm, the way you act, the way you do things, the way you treat each other, the way you collaborate or don't, right? Firms vary. That plus your strategy, that needs to inform your strategy. Your strategy needs to be informed by that. And you can't talk about what you're going to do to change until you've agreed to a very clear-eyed, sometimes painfully honest assessment of where you've come from, where you are. And I think that's where people get a little, humans as well, right? No one likes trying on swimsuits, right? Like, this is not what I wanted to see, right? So law firms, I have to say, we are good at security. We are not good at collaboration, right? That's an example. You can start from that place if you admit to that. And I'm not saying that's my organization or any one organization, but if you admit to those things, you can say, okay, what are our strong suits? How do we remediate some challenges we're going to face? And now we can set reasonable goals. Now we can say, a year from now, we would like to, and 2 years, and in 5 years, we'll be there. I think there's a lot about, I've certainly been reading and educating myself around this human-centric design and design disciplines, and that honesty also coming with psychological safety when leadership teams and teams that are working on, okay, we're going to change, we're going to disrupt, and I like the cartoon where they're trying to change the tire of the car while they're driving it, you know, because you're still running a big active business and servicing your clients and everything's still going on. You don't go time out, world. We're going to innovate now. You're doing everything you normally do while also trying to change the tires of the car that's flying down the highway at 60 miles an hour. You can't set reasonable goals if people aren't safe to say, if we fix this, that'll make all the difference over there. But I have to know my idea will be heard, that I can be brought into the conversation. Maybe I'm not the most technical person, but I do all the data entry for the marketing department. And I don't really know all this other stuff you're talking about. Am I safe to come in here and give my ideas? I think they'll help, right? So, but you have to create in your culture, the way your culture works, you have to create an environment where people can get up to speed, can become fluent, can have a voice, can be safe, can be institutionally recognized and rewarded as well, right? And you can't start a transformation journey until you've done that, truly, in my opinion. But a lot of firms, and I'm going to pick on not any one person, but there are firms and companies, I won't pick on law firms, whose strategy is to put out a press release. Done. Innovation executed. I bought a thing and I put out a press release, and now we can all go back to our day jobs. And I'm being facetious, but honestly, there's a lot of that going around. Okay, we did transformation, we did innovation. We're look at us. We're on the front page of the American Lawyer with our big press release. But under the hood, there's not the engagement. The culture has not been reformulated to enable that. There's no measuring of outcome or output. You know, how do you know that did anything for your bottom line, for people's satisfaction? You know, how is that aligned to a real strategy? And the answer is kind of wasn't. The goal was just to say we did it.
I think you said something really interesting. Well, I think you said multiple things really interesting, but I'm just going to pick on the most recent one where, you know, we bought a thing, right, in checkmark. And I think it's worth kind of talking about that a little bit, because buying a thing isn't necessarily a bad, buying products and buying tools, that is part of this transformation strategy for sure. There's a component of that. But I think what you're getting at is that's not enough, right? Especially for, large law firms buying everything. And here I'm maybe putting words in your mouth. So I'll state something, and then you feel free to kind of push back against it or let me, kind of know your thoughts. But is buying tools enough for a large law firm? How do they, to, kind of reference something you said earlier, how do large law firms, Holland Knights, et cetera, how do they basically provide something a Holland Knight way that they can't get somewhere else? Like, how do they differentiate themselves? Can they do that just buying tools? When you think about data transformation, are you thinking like, is there more than tools? Like, how do you think about putting that fingerprint kind of on a work product? What's your thought?
Yeah, you have to buy stuff. Of course, we're a big, best-in-class, enormous, multinational, multi-billion-dollar enterprise. We're running a big business here. You got to buy stuff. I think the disconnect that you hear about anecdotally is it came down from on high. We got to do AI. So we're real quick going to look around, and there's 3 or 4 products, and we're going to pick one and sign up with it, put out a press release, and then really neglect the change and transformation, the human-centered aspects of that, right? Really, you can neglect that. You can neglect the client messaging. Did anyone think about how we explain to the client who is scared of AI why we're on the front page of American Lawyer talking about AI? Has anybody consulted with that client relationship team? Have we worked out the messaging? What about pricing? What about the clients that are going to call and say, I understand you automated away associates, so I hereby mandate you no longer charge me for associate time or paralegal time. You bought a product, I saw it in the news. Has anyone thought about all the other things it takes to bring your entire organization and the clients you represent and the people that comprise the organization? Because we're professional services, that's all we sell is time and minds. How have you brought them all into that discussion, prepared them for the publicity, and then taken them through the change to their workflow? And I'll pause in a moment, but one of our main observations thus far in working with automation tools, and I include Gen AI chat type stuff, and it's just automation tools, right? one of the most, not surprising, but most really like profound, impactful realization we've had working with hundreds of lawyers over months and months and months is the coaching or the planning or the professional development or the lawyer leadership need for involvement in what do I do with the time I used to spend doing this task that's now automated away. That's not an instant pivot on a dime. I mean, you can't suddenly give me back 25 of my half of my work week and expect me to instantly reposition my activities to strategic. I mean, we say these things, oh, well, you'll just be more strategic. Great. On what? Has anybody coached me into what, oh, well, you'll just do more business development with your clients with that time you used to spend typing into forms. Okay, but I don't have a dashboard for that. Nobody's thought about enabling me for that. I've never really spent that time. My clients would be shocked that I'm flying to Cleveland to see them because I've never done that before, right? That doesn't happen overnight. That doesn't turn on a dime. That's not something people instantly go, okay, great. Now this magical backlog of strategic, creative activities that I've been neglecting to do in my work life will all suddenly just flow in to fill the alternative time. I'll be coaching my associates. Well, who do you know how to coach an associate? Nope, never done it before. Why did we think you would suddenly occupy yourself with that? So we're missing a lot of pieces around it in the, again, I'm being facetious, the buy a thing and put out a press release. If you don't have a lot of those other things and things we're not even thinking of yet, these technologies are so new, these changes to our workforce behaviors are so new. Unless you're prepared holistically to bracket up and brace up all the other pieces of the workflow that are disrupted and a person's psychological disruption, change, fatigue, right? If you're not really taking all of that into account and then measuring the outcomes, is this continuing to work? Are people still happy? All the things we talked about. I don't know that you could effectively transform on that basis.
So I'm making a mental list of how data touches all these different topics you're talking about, right? Because, maybe to an outside observer, hey, we're talking about well-being. Hey, we're talking about, how an attorney's time is being, reported and represented, right? We're talking about, chatbots that might have access to data. All these things are touching data.
100%. And I'm using them almost synonymously. It did not make that clear. Nothing I just referenced works without data.
Without data. And so, I mean, one of the things that, if you haven't figured out what data can be available to AI, what can, has your client given you permission? Can this AI use this data? You're dead in the water until you've done that. But even on the back end, something you said, if you don't even have the dashboards if you don't have an idea to think about how you're going to represent people's time, because assume that we start with a fixed fee, right? Hey, we're going to go address fixed fee. We're going to use AI for fixed fee. This is easy, right? That attorney still has to represent their time, and they're still being measured by their time. And even though it's more profitable, the optics of what they're doing
I'm smiling because then your time has to be accurately classified in order to have meaningful reports. And that's an example of AI helping to solve that problem, thereby improving people's satisfaction, improving accuracy, which is then more accurate data appearing in your dashboard. So you're making smarter decisions about how to price, for example, or staff, or upskill someone. Right. Yes. But again, data is at the heart of the engine we're talking about. None of it happens without data.
So if you were, if you were to think about a couple of things, right, of, okay, maybe you're not starting your transformation journey, because I think a lot of firms they've tried things, right, or some have been successful transforming parts, but what are the main components? Like if you had to generate buckets, right, of if I'm thinking about data transformation, right, in true data transformation, what are those buckets that you might think about or address? Sorry, Christina.
No, it's like the perfect segue. So like, it's like you read my mind. I was just going to say, it really sounds like the risk to avoid here is not having a strategy, not building a real strategy. And now the next question to Emily is like, tell us what a real strategy should include. What are the components of a good data strategy?
Yeah. Well, and strategy at its heart, I think, is one of those words like synergy that gets thrown around. Everybody nods sagely, like they understand, and then they don't. Or I certainly never did. It's in my job title now, so I feel like I have to be able to articulate it. But at its heart, strategy is things to do and not do. It's just a way to make decisions, right? So law firm websites, we're the best at everything to everyone, everywhere in the world, all the time, forever. That's the mission statement of the firm. Well, some parts of that can't possibly be true, right? So starting with who are we really, and what could we be doing to make the most impact? I think really practical terms. So understanding, okay, we have a very strict here's a good. We're extremely collaborative, right? So, okay, knowing that, I know that some data initiatives that require cross-team functionality are likely to deliver value very quickly in this environment, right? So this is more of a prioritization thing. I think kind of to combine the questions, I would say almost everything but technology before in making a list of buckets: culture, leadership, boots on the ground, cataloging, governance, right? Not security, I mean governance, right? Diagnostics, what's where, what are we struggling with, understanding the people, getting that all has to happen. That takes months and years, right? And that all would happen before anyone even mentions the software, in my opinion.
I really like that approach of what do we do well, right? What does, so back to that, kind of earlier conversation on how do you use AI? How do you use things to differentiate yourself? How do you use a data transformation? Well, how are you differentiating yourself today? And let's double down on that. And I don't think I've heard anyone say it like that before. And that's a really clever idea, Emily, and like a great approach.
And you can think about culture almost as your organizational personality. And again, just like all of us humans, that sounds daunting. Oh, I'm not an anthropologist. What do I know about cultures? Oh my gosh. But you can kind of frame a personality of the organization, something like being collaborative. It can also be attributes like humility or arrogance, right? Is this an environment where nobody can tell you nothing, right? Like everybody knows everybody's the smartest, everybody knows everything, and nobody wants to be taught, much less trained. You can't say people need literacy, right? That culturally will not fly. So it can be even kind of characterized around, by and large, as a whole, as an operating organism, we have the characteristic or personality trait of being fairly humble, meaning programs designed around literacy could succeed. We would be able to absorb that as an organization. And that like strategy, do I do this or this, is informed by a good strategy. Culture, you can just think about, if it was a person, what would be the personality traits of your organization?
Well, and
Sorry, Morgan.
Well, I was going to say what's really nice about that is it also helps you figure out how to eat the elephant, right? Data transformation, data warehouse, like whenever you throw in data, it can get so big and so, multi-year and it gets really hard to explain the value of data transformation strategy. But if you're able to map it to what do we do well, and just the way law firms, think about, systems and tools and like who owns what data, it allows you to start carving things up a little bit to be able to show progress and, kind of tangible progress over discrete things that reinforce the value of the organization. So I do like that kind of approach. I think that makes a lot of sense. Christina, I'm sorry, I cut you
No,
off.
that's okay. I got excited. I was joking earlier, but like this stuff is exciting, and hearing you talk about, how it actually affects people, thinking about your comment on like culture. And as it brings me back to your earlier point about attorney well-being and how we help attorneys think about, like, to your point, okay, I've got this magic half of my time back. Like, what am I going to do with it? In reality, some of attorney well-being and displeasure with our jobs, with being lawyers, is I'm doing all of these manual things that are like taking up all of my time, and I can't think strategically, and I can't do all these things. So are they magically going to know what to do? No. But going back to well-being and going back to what excites lawyers, what makes them feel valued, what helps them feel valued by their clients by providing high-level strategic service, all of it I feel like has come full circle to me. And again, as a lawyer, I never thought about data. Like I never thought about how it impacted my, my day, my practice of law. And again, going back to like understanding what is the culture, part of that might be, being data driven. That might be part of the culture, is really helping every stakeholder in the various, whether it's, and I know Morgan, we always say the business of law or the practice of law or both. How do we let that data drive us to better outcomes, including well-being, including improving our culture?
That can actually be a kind of a success metric as well. Not so much, not specific to any firm or any role, but us back end data people that now are in the spotlight, but historically kind of the MO was, if I'm doing my job really well, you never know I'm here. You didn't think about it. That sync happened, that dashboard updated, and the report looked good, and you got your time entered, and 4:59 you clocked out, put your purse on your shoulder, and walked away, and never knew any of that, how any of that happened, or what was going on behind the scenes. It's just seamless and smooth, and you're not having to stop and go, wait, why is this wrong? And why do you keep sending me this spreadsheet that has wrong every time you send it to me? You know what I mean? So that can be back to kind of measuring success, reduced interruptions or reduced admin time across the firm, not just lawyers. That can be a measure of success. Absolutely. You never knew I was here.
Well, I know we're coming up on time. Emily, if you had some sage wisdom, or if you could wave a magic wand, right, and make one problem go away, or to tackle one problem, or to give advice to someone kind of in a similar role, what would that be? What's something that you've seen truly make a difference, kind of, for either you, your team, your firm? Do you have any thoughts there?
I would just suggest that you get practical. We said start with things you're good at. You could also come into a role or come into a new initiative and be focused. I mean, this is another approach, but be focused on an immediate pain point, right? You are here, we're airlifting you in to fix this. This data silo is shutting the firm down. Can you sort out how we need to untangle this, right? But pick practical things. Pick things that, again, the firm is ready for, and you are ready for, that is practical and doable. I think where people get frustrated or a little lost is, I'm doing something that the narrative arc of what I'm doing is 5 years. And we all have those. There's a narrative arc of 5 years. I can't go in a black box for 5 years and not show anything. So let's pick up a shovel and start digging some holes where they're needed. And then that traction builds. But you've built some goodwill, you've built some relationships, you've solved some problems. So work practically, and nothing's too small when you're first starting out a transformation initiative.
You've also built some data, so it's kind of self-referential. Like you
Exactly.
get this cycle of like, hey, we're showing value by creating data that shows value.
And then you prove to anyone else, hey, look, I'm capable. Our team can do this for you. Like, look, here's our track record. Call them if you don't believe me. Was it little? Was it just one niche thing in one little department? It was one little problem and some software they were migrating. They didn't know what they had in it. Fine, nothing's too small. Let's just fix a problem that we know we can do.
So I like that, and that if you really want to innovate, right? Let's say your goal, your vision is to innovate in law firms with generative AI. That's not where you start. Mm-hmm. Start small, start practical, start with the data. Get those small wins, but that is a stepping stone to the ultimate vision. And to be successful, be practical. I think that those are really wise words, Emily.
I could talk about this all day. Thank you all.
I wish we could, seriously. I love it. And I loved, Morgan, the way that you really just kind of brought it all together very succinctly. I love just thinking about it at a high level like that.
Well, that's all Emily. There's no me. That's all Emily.
I always love, and I always say that, my job, I always feel like I'm a translator between kind of the legal and the technology sides. And I love everything about this conversation, because both of you are so good at that too. It just feels easy, and you almost don't even think about that we're talking, you're talking about something super technical. So I love the way that you were able to just get it out eloquently. First Emily, and then Morgan kind of bringing it all together. I love that we've talked about a lot of really important things to kind of avoid not having a strategy, not understanding your stakeholders, not having, success metrics. Kind of the inverse, are the risk to embrace is really digging deep, understanding your firm, your culture, your people, building a strategy around, eliminating the biases and the things that we, maybe don't think about that are holding us back. And then I think the last one that you just really articulated, Morgan, but to bring it all home, risk to consider is starting somewhere, just finding something that is a quick win that is, can show some value, getting moving on your journey. So you've covered a lot in the time we've had, Emily. I swear, it's like we've been talking all day.
Yeah, I could. Don't let perfection get in the way of progress.
Yeah.
Love that.
Well, thank you so much, Emily. I hope we'll have you on again in the future. This was really great. And, I'll sign off with just let my mom know I love her as usual. And, Christina, can you take us home?
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. We have loved having you here. I'm sure our listeners are just like absolutely thrilled to hear someone other than just me and Morgan and get those perspectives. We love being able to connect not only why technology matters, but why it really matters in the law, to law firms, to legal departments. And so we have really enjoyed having your perspective. And I agree, we'd love to have you back anytime. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time on the Law Encoder podcast.